more to independent designers, primarily. I sell to some uniform companies, and I sell to about 800 independent designers. And 4 years ago, you wouldn't have wanted to doing what I'm doing. It wasn't a very good business. But today, this has changed dramatically. Why has it changed dramatically? It's changed dramatically because all of the money that is spent on clothes that was being spent on Macy's and Sears and JCPenney, those stores are dropping like flies and they're closing. And I can tell you, Macy's just announced their second 100 store closing and 10,000 employee layoff. I have a friend that works at Macy's, and she says that they're trying to close 500 stores as fast as they can.
I'm one of them.
Why does that happen? Because their product's not very good.
Yeah.
And why are independent designers starting to do well? Because they have interesting product, and they have more educational opportunities, and there are so many more sewing contractors and technical designers now than there were 2 or 3 years ago. And fabric-wise, I've told people, if you can't find it, wait 6 months and it'll be available. So I used to never have prints with continuity. Now I have tons of them. So I want to start out by telling you the number one mistake you can make when you start to develop a line of product. Number one, never walk in a retail store and buy fabric. Why? Because to be successful, you must be able to replicate your products. And you can't, retail stores aren't in the business of offering you fabric with continuity. And if they do offer fabric with continuity for some reason, your disadvantages are just beginning. They probably had to buy it from somebody like me, or one of the people I work for. And fabric, when it's sold in retail stores, comes on bolts. Does everybody know what a bolt is, as opposed to a roll of fabric? So the fabric, in some fabrics, it actually takes on a permanent crease. And you don't want to work with that. Also, if you get to the point where you're actually manufacturing your product, there are cutting contractors who don't want to deal with bolts. They only want to deal with rolls of fabric. And I can tell you that almost all the fabric that I sell comes on rolls, not on bolts. A little bit of it comes on bolts, but not much of it. And aside from that, when things are sold at retail, they don't have to tell you what it's made of. They don't have to tell you if it's waterproof, water resistant. They don't have to tell you anything. There's not necessarily an accurate content label on retail fabric. As opposed to when you buy it wholesale, it has to be marked correctly. So that's another reason that you don't want to do that. And the problems kind of stack up, because if you can't replicate your work, I think what you end up doing is ready, fire, aim. So there are people like me who sell fabric that have continuity, and there aren't a lot of people like me, but there are others. So what I'm going to do is something a little bit different. I'm going to tell you who all those people are, even the ones that I don't represent. So the best people to buy fabric from are, you all have my business card. There's another company in Chicago called Fine Fabric Sales. Go to finefabricsales.com. There is a very good fabric supplier in Missouri called CAR, C-A-R-R, CAR Textiles. And it doesn't stop there, but it's close to stop there. It's close to it. So I have three, I know this is kind of jump around a little bit. I have 3 rules of textiles. Are you from Los Angeles, did you say?
I actually based here in Ohio.
Okay.
College is
Okay.
Ohio.
Okay. Because one of my things is, you'll see in a second why I asked you that. So I have 3 rules of textiles. Number 1 is when you start with craft, you end up with craft. two, you can cheap out on a woven fabric, but not on a knit. And number three, everybody in Los Angeles is a liar. Now, I say that because the places you can buy fabric, New York, Los Angeles, used to be the primary places, not so much anymore. But in Los Angeles, they won't really tell you the truth about the continuity that they have available. So that can be a problem. A few years ago, New York and LA, that was about it. Today, the two biggest hitters in the fabric business among indie designers are both in Vancouver. And there are other excellent suppliers in Philadelphia, North Carolina. I represent somebody really great out of Florida. There's people that it's much more spread out, and that's because independent design world is kind of spread out. It's not a New York business or an LA business. They're really a lot of people talk about two particular indie designers. One is somebody called Elizabeth Suzanne. It's elizabethsuzanne.com. You should look at these websites. They're really good. And she's in Nashville.
Ooh.
And she just hit, last year, I think she did about $3 million, didn't sell anything to any stores. Sold them one at a time. $3 million is a lot to do when you're selling it one at a time. And then there's a little girl's dress manufacturer called Well Dressed Wolf. Also recommend that you look at what they do. They did $5 million last year, and they don't sell any stores. They have flash sales, and they're pretty spectacular. The thing to think about with fabric is that think about it like being an architect. You know, you wouldn't make a house out of balsa wood because it would fall apart. You wouldn't make a roof out of titanium because it would be too heavy. When you customize something, it becomes expensive. And when you use something for the wrong, that's why you don't have fake fur bathing suits. Or, you know, you don't have chiffon coats for winter. You've got to use the right thing for the right product. And what I'd recommend you do is to go through some steps as you develop your product. And whenever I get to this point, I always point this out. If you want to see exactly how not to do this, what Project Runway is about the worst thing you can watch.
Thank you.
And it really is. I mean, they're not going through the steps of production properly at all. So the way you want to do this is if you're going to, and this is, you know, I'm going to try to move you along kind of quickly here in terms of just a lot of, you know, information that hopefully will inspire you to ask some questions. But most people, when they get started, I recommend that you put together some kind of a mood board. What does a mood board look like? It can look like a lot of things. Here's one. And whoop, oh, that would have been good. So if you want, I'll have this to take a look at a little bit later. And then after you have a mood board, and this is kind of important, you don't just start sketching stuff. You have to understand what fabrics are available with continuity, quality, and wholesale pricing. You have to understand what the requirements are for your product. If you're making kids sleepwear, which I wouldn't recommend any of you do, there are very specific guidelines that the government sets up. You have to look at the Federal Trade Commission and see what those guidelines are.
It's regulations.
Yeah, and they're strict.
Very.
And if you're making, you have to understand if you're making, say, outerwear, what keeps you warm? It's trapped air. How do you get a thermal quality in your garment? So it's very important to know what can be sourced. You can't, for example, somebody just asked me this about customized fabric. That is not a place to start. I'm just trying to be as practical as I can with you. Because if you want to print your own fabric, you're either going to go to a company like Spoonflower, I think they're in Georgia, and you're going to end up with fabric that's $30 a yard, not commercially viable. Or you're going to come to someone like me, and the first thing out of my mouth is going to be, well, on knits there's a 300 to 500 yard minimum, and on wovens it's 800 to 1,000 yards on customized fabric or customized prints. So that's not always a good idea. So you've got to use what's available. And what's available is in what I believe they call in mathematics a closed set. So you can't look for the 195 GSM bamboo cotton spandex jersey when there's 200 offered and there's 150 offered. Nobody's going to make it a little bit lighter for you. You have to use what is available. Fortunately for you, there's a lot available. And there's very few things that you'd want to make that you can't find a tremendous amount of fabric for. The other thing that I would do is then take swatches of the fabric. You get color cards from someone like me, from the people at Car Textiles, from Fine Fabric Sales. All those places will will give you actually color cards. It might have some small charge. To get a color card, you want to have a mailing address without a post office box and a UPS number or a FedEx number. If you have those things will move along a lot quicker for you. Then you can take swatches, samples of the fabric, and you can actually install them right on the mood board, right like this person did here. So you can see they wanted to run something with shearling. So here's a couple of shearling fabrics. They actually went out and got the samples they got from me. And all these things were a customer of mine did with one supplier. And then you want to look at the other things you need. What else do you need in a garment? You need closures, buttons, zippers, hooks and eyes, Velcro. If something's got to close your garment generally, so you want that. You want any kind of trim you're going to have. And the reason you want to kind of think of all this stuff on the front end is because once you get moving along and you find out that certain things are difficult to get or are overly expensive or you can't get with reasonable minimums, you're kind of up the creek without a paddle. So early on, you want to take that mood board and start plugging fabrics and trims in. You want to find out what it's going to cost you timeline-wise and price-wise for labels, hang tags, size tabs, care labels, which are all things that are going to go on almost every garment that you make. If you're making handbags, for example, you want to find out what fabrics are appropriate, what won't wear out. And a handbag wearability is very important. So those are all things that you want to think about kind of up front, and make it possible for you to put together your product and have be able to successfully finish it up. Very important is to understand how a garment gets made. So, what do? You have to make a pattern at some point. You're going to, how do you make different sizes? Who knows how you make different sizes? Come on, high school kids. You grade a pattern, okay? That's how you make different sizes. You can learn how to grade a pattern, or you can take your work to a technical designer, like onpointpatterns.com, for example, would be one you can use. There are others. There's one in Ohio called thepatternmaker.com. He's in Cleveland. And so you have to have You have to have your product graded, your idea graded into different sizes. Then you have to make, does anybody here know what a marker is? A marker is what you lay over the fabric that guides the cutting. So anything you're going to produce has to have a marker. And a marker is also produced by a technical designer. Okay, how do technical designers do that today? A lot of them, and almost all of them that you want to deal with, are using computer-aided design. So they're digitizing the pattern pieces that you give them, and then they're developing grade rules. You want the length to be a quarter of an inch of size, a half an inch of size. There's kind of a lot to know about how to size your product. On Point Patterns, one of the reasons I mention them is they have a really good website to kind of read up on what you need to have available for them to work with you, and they kind of explain what their process is. I'm going to give you a couple of other websites to look at. There is something that's kind of a new phenomenon called a product developer. And a product developer is somebody that you go to with your idea, and then they pretty quickly empty your bank account. And the reason they can do that is because they're in such high demand. So they've gotten really expensive. And I have a really good friend who's a product developer, and she's just eternally grateful that she went into that. But you can also get a lot of information for free from them. Go to vmora, V-M-O-R-A, vmora.com. They were kind of the first really took off like a rocket. And their website has a lot of good information, and also the woman who owns that business, she does a lot on YouTube. You can learn a lot from vmora.com. You can learn a lot from clothierDesignSource.com. And again, they also sell templates that can help you aid in your work. clothierDesignSource.com. Those are two companies that will also give you a free 15 or 20-minute consultation. And if you're far enough along, that you're going to get something for free if you talk to those guys. I'd also recommend that you follow the following two people who are in the education business, not like you folks are, but who are kind of independent educators. One is called fashionbrainacademy.com, fashionbrainacademy.com. And again, lots of free information on YouTube, lots of free information on her website. The woman who owns that business is a very experienced designer who's very, very well trained. Studied in Europe and studied in New York, and very, very well trained. So that could be very interesting to look at. And also, when you look at these websites, it's going to inspire a lot of thinking on your part and a lot of questions on your part. So another person that I think you can get to this guy through the Fashion Brain Academy, but there's a guy named Boaz David, B-O-A-Z, and his last name is David. And he's a New York guy who writes about fashion, who's also really interesting to listen to. Now, the person, if you go back to the 15, 17 years ago, there was something online that was the grandmother of all independent designers, was a website called fashion-incubator.com. However, the fashion business moves right along. So she was more relevant 15 years ago than she is now. And if she heard me say that, she'd strangle me.
I won't put that on Facebook.
What?
I won't put that one on Facebook.
No, you know what? She's a really hard-edged person anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But her website might be worth looking at, and she does have a book that it used to be a lot more relevant. It's not bad. It still has a lot of good things. But she has a book that's called The Fashion Entrepreneur's Guide to the Sewn Products Industry. And her name is Catherine Fasanella.
Catherine with a K or Catherine with a C?
Catherine with a K. Fasanella. 2 L's. And so those are all places where you can get a lot of information. And so here's where you can get more information. I'm sure all of you are familiar with Instagram. It's just an almost unbelievably good place to get information. So if you go, for example, to my Instagram account, you'll see that I've posted over 1,000 fabrics that I sell. And, and occasionally my dog gets in there or something. But, so if you're looking for, let's say you are an event planner, and you're looking for 118-inch wide batiste, you can find it there. Let's say you're looking for chiffon prints, you can find it there. And again, it can give you an idea of where to look for more. Some of the companies I work for have really good websites, some are just okay. One of the best is a company called Kendor, K-E-N-D-O-R, KendorTextiles.com. They are the #1 supplier of indie designers to be found anywhere. Dynamite product. And why do they have such a good product? Here's why. They are not that cheap. However, you can always find somebody to do it cheaper. Okay, so cheaping out on fabric is not always the smartest thing to do. However, these guys do have enzyme washed Tencel twill that's like washed silk. That's $10 a yard, selling like crazy. I can also tell you that just going back 5 years ago, I mean, anything over $7 a yard was very, very difficult for a designer to work with. Just didn't really sell. For somebody who was trying to make more than just a few of something. That's not true anymore. So why is that not true? I started to go into this, but there are now hundreds of millions of dollars that are breaking free from the big box stores. And that's got to go somewhere. And there are hundreds of millions of dollars breaking free from, now some of that goes to Amazon, but not all of it. Some of it goes to indie designers. So the indie designer business is the only apparel business that's on a serious uptrend right now. If the indie design business, there's people in New York who, I read this, I don't know whether it's true, I believe it was in Women's Wear Daily, that it's gotten about 50% bigger in the last 5 years. That's pretty good. Something Macy's can't say, something Sears can't say, something nobody in the retail business can say. But indie designers gotten huge. Again, the way you sell the product, you don't have to sell it to stores. You can sell it to individuals using flash sales on Facebook, using Instagram, using your own website. And my recommendation is that you use all three. That you have an integrated marketing approach. And that you also use events. That there are local events where independent designers can sell their product. And the great thing about doing it that way is you don't have to sell anything wholesale. You're cutting out the middleman. So that $100 dress, you can get $100 for it, not 50 or 40. And all the business you do, you get paid for it right away. You're not waiting on the money, which, you know, can be a real problem with retailers. And then this is really interesting, it just happens to be here. And here's one of my customers, and I just mentioned this, here's one of my customers named Sarah Lillard in San Francisco. And so she has, here's, what's your personal style takeout quiz. So how are these people selling their product? They're interacting. They're creating stories about their products. They're making themselves interesting. So that you'll, and some of these people, like Elizabeth Suzanne and Well Dressed Wolf are the two best examples, they almost have a cult following. Well Dressed Wolf, there were people reselling their dresses for $400 and $500. These were dresses that were selling for $88 because you couldn't get them. Here's a, I just went to the second person. This is actually kind of interesting. Here, is it called, there's a local town here, Greenville or something is in there? Is that what it's called? Yeah. Yeah, this designer's from Greenville. This woman makes children's clothes. I'm just going one at a time on my Instagram feed. Out of San Antonio. She has a pretty good business. All these people are using Instagram. Here's the person who has Fashion Brain Academy. So Instagram is kind of the hot ticket in my business. And here's where you are right now. So this is all, there's kind of a new world for you. And it's pretty cool. And there's a lot of developments taking place all the time. There are new fabrics being offered all the time. And, you know, I think it's a pretty exciting time to get into the indie design business. Does anybody have any questions or anything? Go ahead.